In the gospel you have just heard read, Jesus is at the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. He has stopped in Bethany on his way to Jerusalem, his final journey. The bringing back to life of Lazarus is in the chapter before, John 11, so the whole story happens in these two chapters, and it begins like this. This is John 11, verse 1. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Verse 2, Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Isn't that interesting? That's John 11, verse 1. It is made clear that the reader, you, the writer, knows the story of Mary already, the story in chapter 12, or you should know. It is important. And you hear no mention of Mary Magdalene, right, or Mary of Magdala. And actually, you hear the village, not of Lazarus, which is how we're told that culture works, of Bethany, but the village of Mary and her sister Martha and Lazarus, who is ill. I'm just noting it for the record. At the end of chapter 11, after Lazarus had died and had been brought back to life by Jesus, it says that the leaders of the people, the intermediaries with Rome, the priests, hear of this story of Lazarus and of the excitement of the people and are clear that to keep the peace, to keep the Romans from killing a lot of the Jewish people out of fear of an uprising, they must kill Jesus and Lazarus as well. That is the end of John 11. And if you don't believe me, please go read it. That's John 11. And it says that Jesus and the disciples go out to a wilderness place in Ephraim for a while in response to this threat. So they're in Bethany, they heal Lazarus, he heals Lazarus, and they leave. They are wanted. A new death hangs over Lazarus' head, and maybe he even went along with Jesus and the disciples to pray and quite literally to hide. And then, as the Passover approaches, as it does now for us in 2025, it begins on Saturday, Jesus and his disciples make their way back to observe the Passover in Jerusalem to go towards his certain death. On the way, they stop again in the village of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, which would be like stopping in Marietta on your way, and it's very close, to see their dear friends one last time. There is no question that if Jesus goes to Jerusalem as he intends, he will be arrested and killed. In chapter 11, the chief priest even says, why? If Jesus and Lazarus die, the maker and the object of this great miracle, which has inspired the people, which might lead to them rising up and resisting Roman occupation, because they believe God has come among them, as the Passover story is being recalled for them, a God with power over the mighty Egyptian empire on the side of the enslaved is the story of the Passover, God who freed them through Moses. Could this Jesus be their new Moses, which is what a Messiah is, with the power of life? If that is so, the people might believe we can be free now from Rome, or at least we should try. Caiaphas the high priest says it is better for these two to die than all of Jerusalem. They were the pragmatists of their time, moving the chess pieces in a complex world to get the best outcome for the most people from an impossible situation. They don't appear evil in their motivations, except that they had power over people, over life and death. And in this, they were wrong, so wrong. So some of us got to hear Elaine Pagels in conversation with Barbara Brown Taylor on Friday. And Elaine Pagels has a new book called Miracles and Wonder, The Historical Mystery of Jesus. I just started it, but it's very good. And I know Elaine Pagels was here at St. Luke's a few years ago, right before the pandemic started, at the invitation of Ed Bacon. She is a remarkable historian at Princeton, a historian who became fascinated by the texts of the Gospels that are not in the canon, that are not in the Bible, and who has emerged as someone whose historical study and historical approach and mystical connection and concern about the mysteries of life and death has brought a scholar's eye to belief, and a scholar, not of the Bible, but of history. So someone interested in the historical forces of the time, which she combines with a truly novel set of questions about what it might mean, that shines new light after light on these ancient texts. So she noted some things that I know you all know, but are good to remember as we approach Holy Week ourselves. She noted at Decatur First Baptist Church that Jesus wasn't a Christian. There were some gasps in the room, I'll tell you. I know you wouldn't all be surprised. But a Jew among Jews, a rabbi among seekers, a Jew killed by Rome, by the Roman Empire, at a time when Rome killed many Jews and killed them by crucifixion. And somewhere along the way, we have turned that into Jews killed Jesus. And that was not actually possible at all in that historical moment. Rome is the empire of the New Testament. But somehow as Christians, we did not end up with a robust critique of empires and nations. We have become a tradition aligned with power ourselves, like the priests in today's reading, intermediaries and defenders of the status quo. But the Bible is about empires and how we get them, and maybe most importantly, what becomes of us when we live in them, from the perspective of those who are crushed by empire, from the perspective of the small. You heard Paul say in the letter to the Philippians, I am a citizen of empire, I am a righteous Jew, I even had a mystical encounter of Jesus, I was chosen by Jesus actually. All the powers of this world, Paul claims, and the powers of the mystery of salvation. And the powers of this world, Paul also calls empire, things that absolutely make this life work better if you have access to them. It is also crushing for those who don't or find themselves on the wrong side. In their time and our time, cover your face if you dissent, don't be seen in the wrong place, don't post the wrong thing. They are watching you, Caiaphas says. They are watching us. We are watching us, Caiaphas says, to anticipate what they are seeing. We must to keep the most people alive. So I hope I've painted this picture clearly enough for you. This little dinner party we read about today in John is heavy and grief-stricken, even with the miracle man himself, Lazarus, among them. In art, you often see Lazarus depicted as gray and gaunt and hiding in the shadows at this meal. He has been dragged back from the afterlife, from eternity, only to be again under the threat of execution. There have been many theological texts written on this and on why Jesus died, what it means for God to die. And it's strange, of course, because as I said in John 11, it says why Jesus died, because he resurrected Lazarus. He was wanted already for healing, and the fact that the people followed him, masses of people followed him everywhere he went. He was wanted for calling up the power of their ancestors and heritage and history to an occupied people. He was wanted because there was a risk that when they heard the story of the Passover and God's liberation of their enslaved ancestors from Egypt's mighty armies through the Red Sea waters, which is the story of Passover, that they might be a little too ready to stand up for themselves in the humiliations of their day-to-day. And then it says very clearly, Lazarus. The people believe he brought a dead man back to life. Lazarus. So we must kill Jesus and Lazarus, the high priest said. Now I'm guessing these priests didn't believe this story about Lazarus, or they would have been afraid to touch either of them. But they were worried that the people believed. They were worried about the belief of the people. So back to our story. Mary, who is important, John 11 and 12 tell us, Mary, in the heaviness of this room, breaks open a bottle of pure nard, it says, that is for the anointing of the dead, we are told, and pours it on Jesus' feet and wipes his feet with her hair. Can pause in the beauty and tenderness of that moment. The entire dinner feels like a foreshadowing of the Last Supper. The same characters, the betrayal and death hanging over the room, Mary foreshadowing Jesus' actions. Jesus says Mary has bought this nard for his burial. I wonder when she bought it. Did they do that together in a marketplace in a happier time? Is that how he knew how she intended to use it? But she uses it in this reading while he is alive, and the room is filled with the smell of the essence of the rare Himalayan flower Jatamanji. It is called in Indian languages Jatamanji. Himalayan flower essences came to Rome and Jerusalem and all the way to Bethany. Enticing and decadent, apparently a smell Roman nobility used at the end of an extravagant meal. Maybe she knew she was making their little gathering, like the banquets of Herod and Pilate with their King Jesus. Then the Messiah, the new Moses, who will not see the promised future with his people, Mary is illustrating to them and to us. And Judas notes the impracticality of the offering. He too knows that Jesus will die because he might be part of that. Maybe he knows his own potential part in it already. Maybe in his anxiety he mocks the act of love and grief, the foretelling of his betrayal. This is our gospel reading today. It is rich with smells like the air around here this time of year, perfumed with flowers. Remember it this week when you pass some. Remember the details of this story as we get close to Holy Week. A small family of siblings, one sick one and two sisters, one who touched the feet of Jesus, can you imagine, and filled her own hair with his death smells. Elizabeth Schrader Pulcher is a Bible scholar who theorizes that there is actually only one Mary in the text, awkwardly divided into this Mary and Martha and Mary Magdalene. This story illustrates her thesis well because in the other telling it is Mary Magdalene who does this anointing. Schrader Pulcher has noted the apparent edits in old hand transcriptions of the Gospels that seem to add the other Mary and a Martha. If it were true, it would make Mary Magdala Mary the Tower, because tower is what Magdala means, a close and important disciple, and this act an extremely important one that the early church would understand in its significance. So imagine it with me, the small group, including Jesus, coming back to Bethany in the dark, probably watching out for who is noticing them, arriving at their friend's house and washing their feet and maybe their hands outside and settling in for a meal, the terror that hangs over them, the love among them, a motley crew of adults, the wine poured, the water added, the warm bread, and then Mary reaches up to do the unsayable. She breaks the seal on an alabaster jar, and as the scent fills the room, it grows even quieter, and she kneels down and pours it out. She must be crying. They must all be crying. And then she gathers the precious oil and water back into her hair, it says, and sits back. Maybe Martha comes over, or John, to put an arm around her. Judas does his awkward thing that we read about, and Jesus rebukes him while trying to look at Mary, I'm guessing, through his tears. And the wine comes around, and maybe a child needs something, and they try to eat. Friends, the Bible is here to invite you into the depths of your own humanity. And sometimes it may feel like a riddle, but sometimes it is just all there, right in front of us. But we can be removed from it by generations of weird meaning-making, full of the prejudices of generations, the kind that erases a Mary and has to find a reason that Jesus died, a reason other than the gospel one. Because the gospel one turns us to the underside of things, the fabulous world turned upside down in the Bible, the world of second sons and small nations, and enslaved people that walk to freedom on a way that has no way, paths in the pathless places we read, the beginning of a journey where all we can see is an ending, we think. This is not just the Christian life, it is life. Empire, in the biblical sense, called the powers of this world, the ways of this world, is always the site of sin and the temptation to leave God behind, to not trust, to forget the God of the bread of heaven, the God of cups of salvation overflowing, because empire divides, empire steals, empire lies, empire tells you all you have is what you can hold, empire tells you that you do not matter, empire tells you the foreigner and the widow and the hungry child are not your concern. Empire tells you the struggling deserve it. Empire tells you that if you resist, you will be destroyed. God, on the other hand, has made you for freedom, all of this creation for freedom, in this life, in this creation. And while we may not always know how to make it, we will be the ones that dream it, and sing it, and pray it, and point to it, and work for it, and even march for it, and vote for it when we can. It is for freedom, after all, that Christ has set us free. On this anniversary of the death of Dr. King, let us remember, and let us with courage tell the truth that we know and display it. Mary does not let the events of the next day unfold without her pre-telling. She knows. They all know. So they acknowledge it together at her leadership. The next day, when he goes to Jerusalem, the people will throw palms in his path to celebrate their humble king, who absolutely everyone participating in knows will die. It is what I think of when I see a march like the one that went by yesterday here on Peachtree that we got to support with water. It is an act of power, but also of futility, like palms under the feet of a donkey carrying a dusty peasant. Our King Jesus today smells like a king and is surrounded by love, a love that will carry him to face his accusers and show us forever the path of freedom. God is doing a new thing, Isaiah the prophet tells us, like shoots from the spring ground. But first, this death, all of the deaths of our living, until we rise again, to press on and strain forward to tell of the power that is in us.